Center in Hadley, and I just want to have everyone welcome themselves. I am Crystal.
Joanne.
Pat.
Mark.
And our guest.
Ash Hartwell from
Ash
Amherst.
Hartwell from Amherst.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, representing Amherst, let's say.
Okay, so today we're going to start with any opening reflections. Does anyone have anything they would like to share? No? Okay. Well, then I guess we can move on. The clerk's report and the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? Does everyone approve of the minutes? Okay,
I wanted to
Sure.
add something to the minutes.
Is it what you sent me? Or
Yes.
what? She got that.
Okay.
yes, if you want to check, it's on the second page
Okay.
because I added something else, but when I seen the email, I added
Oh,
that.
terrific.
So
She
Thank
just
you.
be sure
She
that that
checked
is
that.
what you would like and what you're
That's
clarifying.
terrific.
Yeah.
Yes, thank
She
you
got it
very
accepted.
much.
Okay. Okay.
Yay.
All right, so then,
Do we
we
go,
want-
I move
we
to
want to, we
make a
want,
motion to approve
we
the
want
minutes?
to make a motion to approve the minutes. Does anyone have a motion
Make a motion to approve.
and a
the minutes.
second?
Yes.
Okay, Pat moved the motion, Joanne seconded. Okay, so Ash Hartwell, you are a representative of one of the many member groups of the Interfaith Opportunities Network, acronym ION. You are also active in the League of Women Voters Racial Justice Committee. And you're here to speak about the diversity, equity, and inclusion for both of those groups and to give us a little information on what you
Yeah.
do.
Let's have it as an exchange, a kind of a, you can ask me questions and I'll ask you questions and we can do it that way. But I'll start out by, how did I get here? Might be not only on Route 9, but I had a strange trajectory, as it were, in my life, and it's made all the difference in how I commit myself to the work.
Mhm.
That I like your statement of your mission.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's been in place for quite some time.
I grew up in Hawaii, and spent a lot of time on the beach and surfing with Hawaiian friends, and I never understood how to put it. I didn't come into the concept of racism until much later.
Mhm.
And then I realized that Hawaii was also racist,
Mhm.
but I didn't know that then. And if anybody had said, Hawaii is racist, I'd say, what are you talking about? Because, you know, we hung out together. Anyway, that's not what really counts, as it turns out. But I was sent off to college in New England because my parents felt I needed to be civilized, and spend my life on the beach. And from college, I went on to volunteer in one of the very first Peace Corps programs in Ethiopia. And I actually lived there for 3 years in a very remote area, and it changed my life. It was an area that had no roads, no doctors, no. There was a school, and that's what I was assigned to, but did a lot of other things too. And I got how to put it? I got a sense of the universality of human potential and human desires, that doesn't matter what your culture doesn't, that there are things that every individual on this globe and this planet would like to see in terms of their life. And cultures vary that, they change it, but they don't change that fundamental. And after that experience, where I couldn't understand why I was given a curriculum to teach European history in a country that had always been independent, virtually, and really it caused a critique of the whole education system and what it was doing to people's commitments to understanding social well-being and progress. It basically was training these kids who I was with to leave the rural area, to leave the hardships, and to leave the farms and agriculture and the life, and to go to the cities and have a white collar job, basically, and get a lot more income than they would from farming. And that seemed to me all backwards, rather than thinking about how can we develop our community so that all of us are going to be better off. the schools were having kids leave. This is true throughout Africa. It's also true here.
Right.
It's also, it's almost universal.
Mhm.
And I began to also realize that a lot of the policies and practices that governments have in Africa are in fact, they have a colonial anti-Black agenda, which says social development means becoming more throughout the continent, throughout the world.
Right.
And especially at that time, there's much more awareness now that that isn't the path, but it was there very strong. So anyway, I came back to DC, and I got involved in a curriculum project in inner city DC for about 4 years that led also to starting up an Upward Bound program. And it was an all-Black school in inner city DC, which my colleagues and I, who were there to actually think about the curriculum and come up with some new approaches to the curriculum with the communities and the kids, saw that this was I'm going to put it just very fundamentally, it was mental genocide. Out of 600 kids who were in the graduating class of Cardozo High School, 2 of them went on to higher education. That's not because the kids didn't have the capacity. It's what the system was doing to them in the schools. It was much more like a penitentiary than a school. And it was an all-Black school, including its staff. So while I was doing that, I was also studying African American literature and history at Howard University, and came across one of my mentors there was Sterling Brown, who was just an eye-opening thinker and poet and a wonderful man. And that led me to think, I really want to continue this work, but I was really drawn back to Africa. So too long story short, I spent 30 years in Africa.
Wow.
Working on education reform at the grassroots and doing a lot of programs in any number of countries. I lived in Uganda for 7 years, and then in a little country called Lesotho, surrounded by South Africa and apartheid at that time, and Botswana, and then went up to Egypt and spent time in Upper Egypt, which is the south, because that's where the Nile comes from, and then Ghana, and lived in all of these places. And later, I then worked with USAID and doing education programs continent-wide. And but when I came back at the end of all that, my kids grew up in Africa. They're biracial, and it was when they came back to this country, we then really realized what racism was, because they experienced it head on, and they hadn't been prepared, and we weren't prepared actually either. And so I thought, if there's anything I can do, maybe it's going to be local. So my heart and soul is in the work of looking to address reparative justice in a sense. So I'm involved largely with 2 different groups. One of them, the Interfaith Opportunities Network. Have you heard of it?
No, I did not until Joanne brought it to my attention.
Well, check out its website. We're redesigning it right now. But
Still good.
essentially, it looks a lot like your mission statement with the idea that spirit matters,
Right.
hugs,
Yes.
caring. Justice isn't just legal.
Right.
It's very personal.
Right.
It's very personal. And it matters about whether you care for people and how you care for them, and whether that's got integrity to it and honesty. And my experience with the Interfaith Opportunities Network is it's very much about 2 things. One is learning about each other's spiritual traditions and their and the values that we share, whatever the religion or faith community, from the Quakers to the Buddhists and I'm in the Baha'i faith, and that's a core belief that we have, is that we look at these as all a contribution to social well-being, but it comes with the spirit. It comes, and that leads people to be, how to put it, I think a bit more truthful and engaged rather than, you know.
Political.
So we do a lot of different work. The first big project that I was involved in when I got started about 8 years ago, that I was started back in 2005, was the helping the mosque get established in
Right.
Hampshire County. And we raised $40,000 with a lot of support and activities from the various faith communities, and did a lot of work. And the imam of the mosque said, "This is incredible. We never expected this kind of support from non-Muslims." But this is an illustration. And our next project was actually, again, one of the faith communities, which was Goodwin Memorial Church, because its structure, which is a historical structure, was actually falling to pieces. They needed new heating. They needed a lot of things. And we had concerts and a lot of work. You
I went to that.
You've been in that, yeah. And raised again almost $40,000 to help them get going. But our work isn't just about helping each other and being aware of our needs. It's actually reaching out into the town and beyond the town into Hampshire County. So on the 400th year after the landing on Plymouth Rock, which the indigenous people call the Plymouth Rock landing on them, we did a lot of work with the 4 different indigenous peoples here. And this is all described on the website, but it included raising funds to help recover land, help develop cultural programs and so forth for 4 different communities, indigenous communities. And that continues. Another activity we did was to have a kind of a summit on reparative racial justice in the town, to get serious about what that might mean. And that had about 100 people came together for a whole long period to really look at that. And more recently, we excuse me, we've we contributed to and then helped to promulgate something called the Stolen Beam. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
I have only a minute left, so but the Stolen Beam is a course that was put together initially by the Jewish community in Amherst, with some input from the Northampton community, to create a really deep education program on the meaning, on the understanding of what we're even talking about with reparations. And it's a 5-week course, and it's quite intense. It's got lots of readings and videos and so forth. And it's kind of like a primer of, but it's deep. It looks at the whole concept of reparations in human history, and particularly looking at the Japanese and the German and Jewish experience after the Holocaust, and how complex it is, but also then gets very much into the economic justice. That we actually were very close with William Darity and his work on From Here to Equality, and that's a really deep study of the economics, what others have called the black tax. So that course has now been run 4 or 5 times with a total number of participants of over 100, and we're looking to build up that base of understanding. I'm also involved on a statewide study. It's a reparations commission that is being formulated in Boston at the State House, but also the League of Women Voters is doing a statewide study of reparations, and we're a local chapter for that, and so we're involved in the work of preparing for that. All of this is to raise consciousness and awareness, because it's not up to white folk to come up with decisions about this. It's rather a question of a much deeper apprehension and understanding of our true history. So I've talked enough, but you get it. I wanted to give you a sense. That was just Ian, but and some of the League of Women Voters. We spend a lot of time actually with our town council members and with our various Human Rights Commission and the reparations assembly that has put together the report, so that and the and also oh, sorry, my senior memory is having
It's
lapsed,
okay.
but how could I find? The police justice alternative.
Oh, right.
Sorry,
Oh,
I
yes.
just really lost it.
That's
No,
fine.
I think we've
But
heard
anyway,
that.
that's a program now funded and supported by the government, having some rough times,
Oh,
having some rough times. It's had a number of rough times,
and what way?
complex, but essentially it was set up with some good intent, but not enough financing and enough thought about its administrative structure so that it isn't able to carry out the work
Yeah.
that it is intended to do, which is to respond to needs for calls for help that usually go to 911 or to the police,
Right.
and looking for non-armed response to areas which don't pose a physical threat.
Right.
And and so that people begin to trust the interaction with the justice
Right,
system.
right.
And that's a long road,
And
That's
there's not
that's-
enough finance to help that see it through
right?
Mm.
So,
efficiently.
I won't go into the details of it, but they lost the first very charismatic head of it, who found that he was actually getting overwhelmed by the task, because he was really trying to make it on the budget and the staff that he had, but it was short, and it was finally basically I won't go into it, but he had a hard,
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
So they have a new director now who's trying to strengthen the process. But we think it's extremely important because it's one of the establishment of the DEI department as a part of Amherst government, and the establishment of CRESS, that's the name of the CRESS, the community response with equity, is the two principal recommendations that came out of a study committee that was established about 5 years ago. And we think it's really important that they be successful. So we spend quite a bit of time almost behind the scenes with town leaders.
Well, that's excellent to know that you are,
We hope.
you have your fingers, your hands in it.
Wow, I'm sorry because I really didn't mean to, but I wanted to explain what we do and why.
And you've provided so much information. I
great.
think we were just all just listening to it and taking it in. And it's just amazing the things that you've done from day one, from Hawaii to now. It's really a path that you chose, and I can just imagine how difficult at times it must have been for you.
Yeah.
And then to go from Hawaii to a college in New England.
That was a culture shock.
Yes, and then to be there and then to go, and experience, when you said you went to DC.
Well, no, Ethiopia.
First
and then
Ethiopia
DC.
and then
Right.
DC. So to be in Ethiopia, did that make you feel a little more balanced than New England when you first left Hawaii and went to New England? Did going to Ethiopia give you a more of a sense of relaxation, since it was Ethiopia and it was a little more of a culture and race that you might have been used to?
Yes.
Yeah, so I would kind of
Yeah,
think
I
that.
felt
Yeah.
much more in sympathy
Mhm.
with this situation in Ethiopia than I did in the situation in Hanover, New Hampshire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Especially at that time, it was Dartmouth, an all male school, and it was, and it had its culture.
Yeah.
You stated that when you did go to DC, you were there for a few years. Now, were you the person who created the Upward Bound program, or you were part of it?
Well, it was a federal program.
Right.
But we initiated one of the first Upward Bound initiatives
Wow,
with the University of Maryland
wow,
and inner city DC. That was
Mhm.
quite a shift.
yes.
And we were able to draw from this team of people that I worked with at Cardozo, who all were engaged with the process of rethinking and redoing curriculum so that it addressed the life needs of the kids. And and we also taught, it wasn't just, here's the curriculum. It was a curriculum that evolved in our dialogue with the community and the kids and so on, in English and maths and all the subject. And we had terrific mentors, really people from Howard and others. And we did a joint program with Howard.
Oh,
We needed that.
yeah. What do you think the issue was? Because you said out of 600, maybe two may have gone to higher education. Do you know what the issue may have been? You said it wasn't due to resources. So do you think it was just due to home life and issues and poverty possibly?
It was that, but it was also expectation.
Mhm.
It was also the sense, the first class I taught was a 10th grade class of kids who basically were illiterate. I mean, they hadn't learned how to read with understanding
Mhm.
and with use. You know, you can learn how to read or you can read how to learn.
Exactly.
And they hadn't learned learned to read to learn.
Right.
If you follow it.
They're not absorbing the
you're
information
not-
they're reading.
You're not using it as a creative force.
Exactly.
And that was just tragic. So, you know, what we did is say, well, the books and the curriculum were off the scale in terms of these kids' experience and their own sense of efficacy to the extent that they had it when they stepped in the doors. And so we just turned it around and made it, first, let's start with an oral experience. Let's talk about the experience in the lives. That turned out to be hard. Let's make a play about that, like Raisin in the Sun.
Right.
We used the oral version of Raisin in the Sun and showed some videos. And so got kids actually interested in learning how to express themselves in language, and then printed it. And so, because the creative word of, being able to create text gets you interested in reading it.
Right.
Yeah, and using it. So it was things like that.
And as I used to be a teacher assistant in a school where it was in East Hampton, and these were children that lived in a group home, and they would come to school, and I was in the 10th and 11th grade,
Yeah.
and they were just being babysat.
Right.
If you didn't want to learn, you didn't have to. And it was sad because you see these children and you know this is the first step of your life. And if
Absolutely.
you're not taking this portion seriously, what's to follow?
Right.
And it's not going to be productive, which causes you to want to be able to have money or to do things, but it starts with your curriculum. And that's why I was wondering about the Upward Bound. I have heard of that.
Mhm.
And I have heard of a few people I know that did go to Upward Bound. And from what they've told me is it's a place someone takes you into their house.
No, Upward Bound is a program for high schools which are in a poor area, and where the kids get a chance to experience university life. It's a university prepared. It's like ABC.
Right, you know what?
Yeah.
They have that in Greenfield.
Yeah.
At one of the high schools there,
Yeah.
some of the kids get chosen and they get to go to Elms College.
Right.
That's the Upward Bound. Okay, I had it.
It's and you work on actually about 120 kids in the program, and the program ran for 3 years. Over 100 went on to higher education.
Out of how many students?
Out of Cardozo, out of the
600.
program.
Out of the 600?
No, out of the 120 kids
Okay.
that were in the Upward Bound program. They were actually, we had to integrate it with Southern High School in Baltimore, where the kids were also mostly white, but they had been refugees from Appalachia, where the
Mm.
mine shut down. They had come from
Oh.
hollers,
Mhm.
and they were, the situation in the families was really bad. There was a lot of drunkenness, there was a
Yeah.
lot of abuse, and it was,
Mhm.
yeah, much more even than the kids experienced in poor inner
Oh, yeah.
DC. It was,
Mhm.
so, our program was radical. We did a cafeteria program, by the way, where we asked people we thought who would be pretty inventive and creative to think of a program they would offer that would make sense to the kids. And the kids then used it like a carnival where they chose what they wanted to do.
Mm.
And that's how, and so it turned around the idea of the agency not being,
Right.
here's what you need to learn, but
Mm.
rather,
Allowing the children to come up
Yeah.
with it, so they'll be more receptive to it.
and the,
Mhm.
and the offerings were quite diverse. But we didn't even start by going onto a school campus and the rest of it, which would have kind of been intimidating. So we started out on what's called an outward bound camping trip for
Mm.
3 weeks up in northwest Maryland in the hills. And,
Wow.
so that kids could learn how they needed to help each other if they're
Right.
going to survive.
I have one more question,
But
and then
so-
maybe Joanne or Pat or Mark may have another question. But when you went to Africa and you stayed for 30 years, you said, did you ever get a chance to go back to DC to see if that upward bound program produced more graduates than when you were there?
Whether the school produced more, because the
Right.
upward bound program continued to
Right,
go,
but
but
just being a part of that program
but
to see if there was any.
it actually demonstrated how to put it, almost the bankruptcy of the school and the system.
Hmm.
I mean, because the schools, really hard for the schools in inner city. If you see how difficult it is for them to change the structure and the power and the way it works.
Hmm, yeah.
And so I can't say that it had an overall systemic effect on the school system,
Mhm.
but it demonstrated that the system itself was failing, not the kids. I mean, over the years, it was clear. Same here in ABC, you know, the inner city schools in Deep Springfield, some of them are pretty good, but
Mhm.
Renaissance and other, but many of the schools haven't really changed very much. And that has to do with residential neighborhoods and their culture and the, and underfunding,
Underfunding.
Yeah.
underfunding.
Yeah.
Right, so I guess there isn't a way really to gauge the effect and the actual prospect or the progress of Upward Bound in a school. I would think maybe they had so if, as you stated, if there's 600 students in the school, and then you have them participating in Upward Bound, and only two back then would go to higher education.
And now, like out of the kids from Cardozo, probably 80 or so went on another over
And
20
that's another
from,
Upward
from,
Bound.
from Southern Baltimore. So,
Mhm.
yeah, but it made a big difference in terms of the number of kids that were going on to higher
Right, so that
education.
program, what I'm trying to say is that program actually is helping. It's helping the children to give them an idea of this is possible. I don't have to, come from a certain income. I
Yeah.
can do my studies, I can participate and do what I have to do and still be able to participate in a program that can help me move forward,
Mhm.
which is something that is a positive outlook for a lot of children, regardless of race or culture, because as you stated, the family from the Appalachian is they're dealing with a lot and they're
Mhm.
Caucasian. So it doesn't matter what race or culture you come from. This is something that's prevalent in any society, in any race. And it's good that this is here. In
Mhm.
our school system, we have high school, we have a college prep program. Am I correct?
Yeah.
And the students can go and
Right.
participate in that. So it's not upward bound, but it does give children the idea of what to expect and gives them the incentive of, okay, if I do this, I can definitely
So
achieve.
you're right. I
this.
think it does give an example that it's possible.
Yes,
But then there are lots of things that really also
And that's the,
big barriers.
that's the scale.
Right.
The possibilities are here,
Mhm.
but your expectations might be here.
Mm.
So it's up to the individual to balance it out and go up further. You know, some people, some children do not have that stable home life or even a family or a group or a
Right.
community. And it becomes overwhelming if they're doing it on their own, you know, so.
You know, I think there's still this very large gap between what we know can happen, you know, and how the system is functions to
Right,
make it
exactly.
so that you don't get transformational change.
Yeah,
I mean, on a scale.
yes, of course.
So that's our task.
Mhm.
That's why we can't feel like, oh, how wonderful.
Right, it's because it's
It-
still
it-
ongoing.
I mean, it's not changing
Yeah.
a lot of the larger system much.
But it's getting there,
But at
because
least
without,
it's a,
right, without you starting or being a part and expanding the way you have,
Mhm.
imagine the amount of lives you wouldn't have touched.
Mhm.
So it may not be on a larger scale that you would like it to be, but it is getting there, and that's what's important.
And also it demonstrates what is possible. And these programs aren't all that expensive or anything. It's perfectly possible to do this. It has to do very much with a buy-in to the political will to do it,
Right.
you know, the
Exactly.
social will, the spiritual will.
All of it.
Yeah.
Mhm. Did you have
And
questions?
you have,
Does anyone have any questions for him? No, Joanne?
I,
Just wow, I think that's.
I appreciate, given that I've known you for many years, to hear the parts that I didn't know. I, you know me, I write notes all the time, but I really had to write down, raise consciousness and awareness, a deeper understanding of our history.
yes,
And as I reflect on some of the recent experiences that I've had in Hadley, that happen to include Crystal and Mark, to see the reality of some of the things in this town. This is a New England town, and there's a lot of people that have lived here for years and know each other. And there are some mindsets. And I've always asked myself, how do we raise consciousness and awareness? Somehow there needs to be an interest in doing so.
yes.
What have you found in all your work that helps to create that spark of interest in someone who may have been ignorant and not getting it, not, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
anything.
This is such a good question. I mean,
Great.
the fact is that, as Shirley Chisholm once said, you know,
Yeah.
racism is so pervasive, it's like the air you breathe, so you don't notice it. And that's
Wow.
really a true statement.
Yeah, I
like
in the
that.
sense that there's, there is, think of your own education. Did you ever hear of, Black Reconstruction in America, the 2-volume work by W.B.B. Du Bois? Everyone's heard of, but there's so much actually available information that isn't, most people aren't at all aware of it.
Yeah.
And it tells us a story that is very different from liberty and justice for all.
Mhm.
And yet, I've moved to South Hadley, and it's a all-white community, and they haven't a clue about why.
Mhm.
Why it's all white?
Why it's all white.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And by the way, this really hurts me personally, both because of my family, but also because I really miss being with diverse people. And actually, since I lived in, most of my people I worked with, colleagues and so we're African, we're Africans, and I really miss the the culture and the vibrancy and the rest of it.
Right.
And I can see how there's just very low awareness of what we miss.
Right.
I mean, as a whole society, but
Yeah.
everybody misses, black and white,
Mhm.
and in between.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It is true,
That is true.
when as I stated, you have had so many challenges in your path and diversity. I'm quite sure that, and maybe I can and maybe I cannot say it, but maybe too, your emotions are more deep rooted than maybe someone who grew up in a diverse neighborhood because you've experienced so much diversity, because you've been to so many different places and you've seen it firsthand and how emotionally you are connected to it.
Yeah,
It does, by looking at you.
such a gift.
Yeah, looking at you, I can see it really bothers you that the way the racism is and the way the culture is and how you just, how much you know and how less someone else may know.
It's not, it's, but coming to your
Yeah,
question,
I can read that too,
Hmm.
how that richness has made your life. I love that perspective. How do we open people's eyes to the fact that you actually could be missing something and you don't even know that?
yeah, actually, the level of denial and ignorance is actually staggering to me. But, and this isn't a condemnation, but it's an observation.
Nice.
And so you want to, Loretta Ross, if you've heard of
Yes.
her,
Yes.
calling in and calling out, I think is beautiful. How do you call people in? Well, you care for them. Yes, it may be that they're not aware of things, but then it's an opportunity. And so and the stolen beam is a way of actually having people called in. And once they get a little bit hooked, they really do. They really get, yeah. So,
When you say the stolen beam, that's in Amherst, and you said it's done by the Jewish culture?
oh, not anymore.
Oh, not
It,
anymore.
it was for the first round,
Right.
yes, but now it's actually nationwide.
Oh, cool.
And you could do it here in, you could do it here in Hadley for
And-
sure. I've done sessions in East Hampton, and there have been 5 or 6 sessions in Greater Amherst,
Yeah.
not just,
Right.
Yeah.
and if you were interested, it could be organized.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Good to know.
How, if we were to discuss this and be interested in it, how do we
Let
just
me-
reach out to you?
Let me send you all, if I
Okay.
can, I'll send it to Joanne.
Yeah, sure.
And send you the program, and you could take a look at it, and then if you'd like, I'd be happy to come back and talk about how we get people interested and how we and how we run it.
And the full extent of that actual program or group or committee for the Stolen Beam works, so that we
Okay.
know
Right.
exactly, because I know you mentioned it was reparations regarding that,
Right.
but now that you said it's grown, it's probably including so much more.
Well, it still focuses on what we call reparative justice.
Reparative justice.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Looking at the consequences of our history on a lived experience today. People say, well, reparations, that happened, Civil War and slavery, that's a long time ago. Malcolm X once said, well, if you put a knife into me and then you said, well, let's make it equal and I'll pull it out. Now let's run a race.
Mhm.
It isn't equal.
No, not at all. Not at all, because the one.
Because
wounded-
that historical intergenerational experience
Mhm.
continues.
Mm.
So,
Well, one more, sorry about this, your email address for the Interfaith Network. Is there an email address? or-
just go online for interfaith, just ION. That's,
.com
that's,
or,
yeah, well, I don't know what else you'll get, so maybe
I went to their
Interfaith.
website.
this is just for people watching,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
case
Yeah.
they
Oh,
want to
okay,
reach
for
out.
the Interfaith Opportunities Network.
Yeah.
So
There it is.
So
If there's
website,
a-
what's the
That's
website?
Oh, Mark, good work.
What is the website?
I just searched ION Amherst and
That came up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Okay,
And
so,
that's,
so search Iowa and Amherst, it'll have the information for the
Right.
Interfaith Network and
Right.
everything else
Yeah.
that,
You could
he
hit,
was speaking about. as
contact
far
us.
as
and
the-
we'll- Yep.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate
and
that.
I will send you the Stolen Beam.
Yes.
I just
Yeah.
Googled Stolen Beam and it says it's from the Talmud. Did I say that right?
Talmud, yeah.
And it said that there were two rabbis, one said, it said, what do you do if your house is, if you discover your house was built of stolen materials? One rabbi says you tear it down and return the beam. And
Oh,
the other one says you leave the house standing, but you make reparation.
Oh, I love
oh.
That's
there we
that's
go.
the, that's,
Thank you.
that's good, yeah.
Where did you
It-
get that? Did you just look that up?
AI over.
That's-
Yeah, I got it.
That's the
That is
Talmudic
wonderful, though. I
story
love that.
it's the idea that some rich people built this beautiful house that had a wonderful beam. I mean, it was a huge beam at the top, and then they left. And they just left it there, and 10 years later, somebody came along and said, we could use that beam, nobody cares. And they took it and they built their house with it.
Mhm.
I see.
And then people came back and they said, where's our house? Where's our beam?
Mhm.
Oh, and
What to do?
Right.
boy, that
What
brings up
can
a
you
lot.
do? What can you
Because there's
do?
a lot of stolen stuff.
Well.
But this is positive. This is like what we talk about in
Right.
here is, yes, there's horrible things, but what are some of the lights?
Right.
So what are some of the places where we see spirit and light rising to do something? And as you said, you've touched, and I know you've touched many hearts. But that matters, even though we haven't transformed the whole planet yet.
Right. It's wonderful. I really do appreciate you coming today.
I appreciate.
You've provided
With you.
an array of, just multitude,
Right.
just a treasure chest of wonderfulness. And I love it.
Flattery gets you everything.
Thank you. I'm trying. Well, I appreciate it. I really
better-
do.
I don't know
Mark.
if you read the Gazette, but
Yes.
my neighbor passed away last week. And
Oh.
he has there's a
Oh.
beautiful obituary in this morning's Gazette about George Urch. And
Oh, I
George,
saw
and
that.
there's such parallels.
George is my,
He was
George
in
was my
Nairobi.
first mentor. I shared an office with him when I joined UMass way back in the
Urch,
sixties,
URCH.
in the sixties.
Oh, I
Yeah.
saw that.
So
they
George
wanna
is
know
a dear friend
Oh, yeah.
and a dear, loving, what a lovely man,
that.
He,
It's your
he
neighbor.
passed away on his
Yeah.
94th birthday.
lovely man.
Wow, 94.
Yeah.
That's excellent. I mean, I always say you can live to be 100, but it's how you're living. You know, some people can live to be 100 and be disabled or just be unhappy or just be sad. And they always say, if you're not enjoying life, it doesn't matter how many years you've lived. You want to make sure that you're doing something to bring you joy, no matter how small or how large.
Yeah,
The
Yeah.
joy is in the giving.
Yeah.
thank you for that. George is
No, I'll look it up.
such a dear man.
Yeah.
He had a heart of gold. He
Yeah.
did, yeah.
Well, again, I want to thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So much.
Yeah,
Another
thank
hug.
you. Another hug.
I love their hugs. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, if
Yeah.
you wanted to stay, you can, but if you have to go.
I think I better, yeah,
Okay.
I think I'd better get back to, yeah. And I will send you the Stolen Beam and,
Okay,
hello.
that would be wonderful. And you can pass them along to Joanne and she can
Right.
give it to
Good,
send it to
yeah.
her.
Yeah,
And if, I'm quite serious about if the town might be, if people in the town might be interested, we could,
Of course,
you know.
we're definitely going to look into that information.
Mhm.
As Mark pulled it up, it is so far, it has a great information that I think we can all look into, but we'll need to discuss that.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
thank you again, Ash. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Is that his code or no? That's-
No,
That's my
his code
code.
is over here.
Okay. Now we're going to move on to old business.
Do we want to go to public comment?
Oh,
Because we have a visitor.
oh,
I just stopped in after the other meeting and
You were up over-
no comments. Out.
yeah, I see him sitting over there. I figured he probably came in to see what we're doing. Cause I seen him in
I think
there.
I've seen you at meetings. I'm Joanne.
I seen him at town meetings,
That's great.
at the podium.
I'd like to speak on it.
I see that, and it's all worth it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot for coming. Say hi to
We're
Trish.
going to go into old business now. I just want to speak on the Thanksgiving meal. It went wonderfully. Everyone was so pleased to receive the meal. It really, it was joyful to me. It was lovely. I love cooking, so cooking everything that I did and then wrapping it in the boxes and then delivering it, it was heart-wrenching for me. And a lot of the people that I did deliver to were actually homebound. So they would not have been able to receive a meal if it weren't for word of mouth as well, because they didn't even have a computer. So a lot of the people I delivered to were elderly and disabled, lived alone, didn't have a computer. So it really made me feel good that this is the demographic, these are the people I wanted to reach. Because cooking at the senior center, these are people that can get to the senior center. These are people that are mobile. I wanted to reach people that are,
The shut-ins.
yeah, the shut-ins that have no one, that are by themselves, that just wanted a home cooked meal.
Easily forgotten.
It's very easily forgotten because one person I went to, she had a cabinet full of pictures of her family. And she's alone. Everyone has moved away and she doesn't own a computer and if, she doesn't FaceTime, so she's by herself. And I was just glad to do that for her. It really made me feel good. I loved it. So I did reach out to Alyssa and I did not hear back. So I do not have any updates on that.
Any updates regarding new guests?
So I did speak to two members of the DEI for Hopkins, the high school. One is Elizabeth and the other is Adam. And I want to speak with Annie and the principal first to make sure, as well as, someone from town, to make sure there's not going to be any conflicts with having them on the board. What I would like to do once I find out if it is okay or not, is just to have them in as a guest, just to see how well they handle the whole meeting. If they have any questions, I do not want to overwhelm them. They still have school to deal with and their own personal life. So if everything goes well, then yes, I would like to have them in to sit in and watch and hear the meeting and see how they appreciate it. And if they have any questions, they can always raise the question.
I was so impressed with how articulate they were and they could
Oh my
really
goodness.
express their thoughts and opinions and I can't imagine, I don't remember that I was that articulate
Yeah.
at that age.
And they have so much going on.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
never ending, from school to after school to work to home and then wake up and start all over again. And the Sudanese, I mean, we're supposed to talk about that later, but it was wonderful as well. It really was. The event was excellent. I appreciate it. And it's just so much talent when you look at now and from years ago when we grew up. They're so much more aware of where they want to be in life, what they want to do, how do they want to get there, which is important to see because this is our next generation. And we do want to make sure that they have an idea of what this world is and what it's going to become. And to have the outlook of, okay, I need to do this now and not just surf through life and then get to a point in your life where you have to make decisions and it's too late. It's too late to do so. So I know we're having Nikki in January. I want to reach out to a liaison for the elementary school. See if someone from the DEI of the elementary school may want to come in. I'm not sure though, because I do think that might be a little much for elementary children. We do have our meetings at 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. I think that's a little late. So I guess we can all think of anyone else we'd like to bring into our meetings for our next guest. All right, great. Does anyone else have any suggestions right now for a new guest or? Not yet, we can just all come together later with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have ideas, but I'd rather you know,
Kind of
like I
first.
did with Ash,
Of course.
and then bring, because it looks like we've got a guest for January, so then we've got February, so we've got a little bit of,
Okay,
because I got some ideas.
I know you do, John. So new business, I've already spoken about Nikki. Mark will provide an update on recent developments with the Affordable Housing Trust and the Econolod Affordable Housing Project reported in the newspaper on December sixth.
Yeah, we had a, we had the Valley Community Development Corporation team. Well, there was, I guess they expressed, a desire to, inquire if Hadley would support their project. And so there was a joint, there was a Hadley Affordable Housing Trust meeting scheduled, posted, put on the agenda, so the planning board, we started with that and then went on to planning board issues afterwards. Because the Affordable Housing Trust, if you're not familiar with it, is, it's in its infancy. We just created it a year or two ago. And to create a membership, we made it the 5 members of the planning board and a representative from the select board. So right now it is Molly as the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust coming from the select board. And then the other 5 members are the planning board members. And so we convened that meeting, and Laura Baker came from Valley CDC and gives an update. They're hoping to start construction in, I believe, 2026. I believe that they had a quicker timeline originally planned,
Yes.
but when the ZBA turned them down, I think they missed a grant cycle. And so now they have to get their funding in order. She said that their project to convert that is estimated to be about $19 million. And so there's a state funding cycle coming up. And her point was that she was asking if Hadley wanted to contribute, she was asking $250,000 out of our Affordable Housing Trust toward this project, which would have been less than 1%. You know, it would be, or 1.5%. I can't remember exactly what the math is, but and our entire Affordable Housing Trust is in the $400,000 range, because it's not something that has a consistent or regular or even frequent revenue stream. Unlike, for example, the CPA, which gets its funding from a state mandated mechanism. The Affordable Housing Trust currently, the only way, originally the only way it got funding was from, its original funding came from the Barry Roberts project, the East Street Commons. There, where by the number of units that he built, he was required to build a certain amount of affordable units. But there was an option that if you weren't going to build them there or offsite, you could also make a payment in lieu. So that was where that funding, and we haven't had any other projects do that. Now, just a sidebar, at the last town meeting, the gates were open for him to do another senior housing project on the Bab
In the back farm.
farm.
Right.
And there he said publicly that he will build the
Yeah.
affordable units, which is what we want. We don't want money. We want to help people who can't afford to stay in Hadley.
Exactly.
And so anyway, there was sentiment expressed that this was giving away, 250,000 was over half of our balance, and that was gonna be a big pill to swallow. So I countered with, what if we contributed 100,000?
Mhm.
And that was discussed and debated and voted on, and that passed
Okay, good.
with stipulations,
Mhm.
that, the stipulations would be, was there local preference?
Mhm.
Because we do have, and I think I expressed at that meeting, from a diversity, from this group, from a committee focused on trying to improve Hadley with the benefits of diversity.
Right.
From that perspective, the lower to zero local preference would be the best way to bring the most, to have the highest chance to increase diversity in town by bringing people from out of town, because I don't remember what I think Hadley's 90 or more percent white.
Right.
And there have been past conversations about the people that work at the malls and things like that, and have to commute from, Hampden County or wherever. If they could live there, they could work there. And there was an interesting point made by, I don't remember his first name. I want to say it's something like Cool or something, but one of the Parmar.
Shardul.
Yes.
I've got the
Shardul.
article here.
Okay,
Right.
yeah.
Farmer.
Parmar, that's the family that owns a number of hotels in the valley.
Mhm.
They're planning to, sorry, while I digress I'll come back around. They were there also at the meeting, or he was there to talk later about what they're proposing for the next town meeting is if there's any way we could allow increased density or development in the village center district, which would cover from the bridge to, I think, Spruce Hill. Because they have the property over where Edible Arrangements was.
Manny's
Yeah,
is
Yeah,
right across from me.
where Manning's was, right? And they, that is dying. There's very little revenue to keep businesses there, and so they have looked at options, and one was to do housing. But and this is his argument that the industry-wide, it's hard to make the numbers work with less than 50 units. So
Mhm.
with the land that they have to get 50 units, we would have to allow an increased density there. So anyway, he expressed, while Laura Baker was talking, that he has, I think they have 40-ish employees
Mhm.
between different locations
Mm.
that work in their hotels that, might work the front desk, might be housekeeping, might be maintenance, all that kind of stuff that would qualify for local preference because they work here, but they commute from somewhere else.
Right.
So that was an argument towards local preference. Anyway, so we passed it with 100,000, 30% local preference,
Mhm.
and Jim Maximowski said he was not gonna support it unless it was in perpetuity.
Hmm.
Now, I should also go back and say that none of these conditions had been negotiated, because as Laura said, when that would usually be negotiated would be at the ZBA, at the review, when they would say, oh, well, you know, we like this, we don't like that, what can you give us? But they just out of hand said, no, we don't feel comfortable doing this, we're three people in the code, you know, that was their comment. So I guess this was a brief opportunity to negotiate some of that, so that's what they wanted a contribution from the town, which they said helps them in the state funding. The state looks and evaluates applications to see, is the local community supportive?
Mhm.
And we basically said, we're supportive of 100,000, but maybe not so much of 250,000, but you know, look at our community. We're a much smaller community than
Exactly.
a lot of these other communities that Boston looks at. So for us, that's a big, you know, that was still
Especially when it
25%
goes
of our, you know,
in accordance to our funds.
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
So anyway, so that's
Can
how
you
that,
just clarify the authority of that group to, it sounds like you negotiated for 100,000 and agreed to 30%. So your group had the authority to make that decision?
and so I think, voted, if I remember correctly, to recommend that. And so there's another meeting that's gonna happen. So that has to be approved by the select board.
Okay, all right.
So so the next select board meeting was the next day, so it was a little too short to get on that agenda.
Mhm.
So the next one is,
I think it's Wednesday, 18th.
18th, maybe?
That's a Wednesday, yeah.
Yeah,
think
I
so.
think it's the 18th. And so, anybody can correct me, but I think that they start their select board meetings at 6. So there's a 5:30 meeting of the, Hadley Affordable Housing Trust. I don't, this is the first time we've done this, so I don't know exactly how it's gonna play out, but I assume there's going to be a transition from our meeting into the select board meeting, and that we are going, or maybe that's a joint meeting at 5:30 before they go into their regular meeting, so.
To get everything.
And so then we, as the Affordable Housing Trust, would make our recommendation
Okay.
to the 5-member select board, and then they would have to vote yay or nay.
Okay, okay.
So it's not a done deal. So that's where that lies.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that information. That is a great update on everything that we did not possibly know. I'm quite sure for anyone who's watching, that's more information for them to understand what is happening behind closed doors as far as the Econo Lodge and the new proposal for the 50 units across from Nissan dealer from the bridge all the way down. So Hadley is definitely trying to provide opportunities to those who would like to stay in Hadley. To downsize from a large home and stay in Hadley that they've been all of their life. Their generations here, children here, grandchildren, and they're comfortable. And I'm quite sure a place where you were born and raised, you don't want to live out the rest of your days in a strange place. So this just lets everyone know that, Hadley is definitely looking into, is working with the community to help those who want to stay, the elderly and, possibly children or grandchildren of those who stay. They work, they can get their income up and maybe afford a house in Hadley.
And that local preference, I believe, has 4 qualifications. Either you live in Hadley, you work for the town of Hadley, you work for a company in Hadley, or your child goes to the Hadley schools.
Right.
Those are the 4 qualifications for local.
Mhm.
When they do get to the point of funding and they're going into construction and they're building it, they will have a lottery. And if this is voted to go forward and they get funded by the state, there's still a lot of
Steps to go to.
steps and hurdles. Then there would be a lottery and the first 30%, so that would be the first 15 units. The lottery would pick from the applicants who qualify as local.
Right, I was going to say,
Right.
yeah.
And if there aren't 15 applicants that qualify as local, then it'll just go to open.
Yeah.
So,
And that is quite a bit away. I mean, it's
Yeah.
still in the negotiation phase, so we do have time to places to get. So as far as the Mass Cultural Council, I did see, I received an email from the Mass Cultural Council stating if you are part of a committee or if you know.
when you splice this recording, you'll see that we suddenly went offline I think it was
Mid-conversation.
mid-conversation.
You were still talking about the.
No, I think.
No, I was
that's
talking
right.
about.
We had
We
jumped,
start, yes,
we had jumped to new business item C, which was
The
that's right.
grant from the
the
Culture
Mass
Council.
Cultural Council, right?
So I reached out, did not receive, bye to our guests.
Yeah.
I did not receive a response, as well as I tried to find it on the internet and I cannot find it anywhere at all. And I'm hoping the timeline hasn't passed. What it was, Pat, is if you have a committee that's run, what was it, Biopic?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Black,
But-
okay, you know what that is.
Indigenous.
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
So a committee run by a
BIPOC?
Yeah,
BIPOC, yes. And then also the committee has information as far as reaching out to for inclusion, which this committee fits everything. You could receive a grant towards that, but not because, so we wouldn't receive a grant because it's biopic,
BIPOC,
by pocket,
Black, Indigenous, people of color.
BIPOC.
BIPOC.
by
Okay,
POC,
thank you.
okay. And, but we can receive a grant. It's hard to explain, because if you have someone that's BIPOC and you want a grant to do something that is diversity, you can. So I looked into it and I can't find that email. I don't know what happened to it. So if anyone can search and help me look, that would be great. Also, when Mark and I and Joanne did meet last Thursday, I asked them to help me come up with ideas for any type of entertainment or inclusion for the town. So this way I can make the proposal to ask for that grant. And that's what we're working on now. So,
We were a little subcommittee.
yes, if anyone had any information or any ideas, if you wanted to share, if not, when you do have it, we can then, email to each of us and let us all say, yeah, I think this is nice, I don't think this will work, just to get our opinions, but I will keep on trying to find that information. I don't know what happened to it. I hope you didn't miss the deadline.
Yeah, because I remember you reading that to us.
Yes, but I don't
Right.
understand where it went. I surfed everywhere
Well,
in my email,
Right.
everywhere, and I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
Um,
and we just talked briefly about the idea of that nice World's Fair event,
Yes.
like, gathering some of the people, the organizations who sponsored that, and seems we couldn't get that going. That was one of the thoughts we had, as I recall.
yeah,
I'd be happy to look,
thank you.
and I also would be happy to look to see what events and activities they've sponsored. And like come up with a list, and maybe that list would inspire
I
us.
think this is new, the
Nice.
BIPOC.
Oh, for the Mass Cultural Council BIPOC specifically?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
well, I'll do
but if
it.
you
do what you
can,
can.
because again,
I'll-
I've tried to find it.
Okay, I'll see what
and
I can find.
I have no idea. I don't know why I can't find it in my email. It's somewhere, just
Yeah,
doing
because
things.
we're in the meeting now, that's why.
No, this was before the meeting.
And
Yeah,
I'll-
true.
work together
Yeah,
offline,
thank
just
you.
the two of us. How
Thank
does
you,
that
Pat.
sound?
I
There you go.
appreciate that. Thank you so
Okay.
That's
much.
great.
Yes. Okay, and the open agenda,
I would happily contribute a
Yes.
couple items. One thing I'd like to mention is, so one of my other committees, is the, smart growth that's looking at affordable housing. And we had some people, some public attend, either in person or on Zoom. So what we did is we created at, very early on in our meeting, so like for us, it might be after the clerk's report, something, we put a public comment section. If someone wants to come and share something, and that might be something that we want to, for example, we just had a gentleman, unfortunately, we weren't recording. Tony has left it, it appears. But that would have been an opportunity for him to come in and share something that he wanted to share.
Mhm.
Or, I'm just gonna say, that's an idea to put, open to public or something, and then at the end have open agenda again, if they wanted to then respond to something that which was,
Mhm.
what we were starting to do when this recording stopped, was that, Tony was pointing out, if you're okay, I'm gonna just kind of recount
Okay,
what was not recorded. I asked Tony if he had any things that he wanted to say, and he,
Within
I'll
the
try to
context of your
summarize.
report.
Yeah, and what he wanted to point out was that he found it troubling that he wanted to know, or I think he said that at that last meeting, he wasn't aware that there was any I acknowledgement that there had been significant opposition to the Conowatch conversion project at the meetings when it was presented. And that, you can correct me if I got this wrong, I believe he said there is a perspective in town that, there was opposition, the ZBA voted them down. They then, sued to the, state housing court, which overturned it. And the select board, chose not to appeal the decision, so that thereby gave them the go-ahead that they had not gotten from the ZBA. And if I can paraphrase what I heard Tony say, that felt like a slap in the face because there was so much opposition expressed at the meeting. And I started to say that there was vocal opposition, but there's also an argument to be said that there was never a town vote on it. There were three arguably conservative members that said, we're not comfortable supporting this. I don't know, I don't remember exactly what they said, but I imagine their constituency said, we don't want this. And there was not a similar effort to bring in those in support of it. So those that attended the meeting is, I think, the point he was making, that the opposition vocally outnumbered the supporters. And so it seemed unfair or improper that the select board, which had, three members of the five were in favor of it, chose I think he said, I don't know this, but I think he said in executive meeting, they chose not to appeal the state land court meeting, so. So I can certainly understand if you're opposed to this. I know that there was a earlier select board member, I think, who said that when this project was first announced, that it was gonna bring crime and crap to town, which is something that we took offense to and have tried to educate people otherwise. But I think that the heart of our committee, this is just me speaking, is that we embrace diversity, and that doesn't mean that our opinion is right and their opinion is wrong. We disagree on what is best for Hadley. And so what I was going to say, if he had been able to stay, was that in my ideal world, we would put it to a town vote. And I can't speak for the select board members and why they chose not to appeal. But I can guess, and my hypothesis is that there is a majority of progressive voters in town. It's just a question of getting them mobilized and getting them to meetings, things like that. And so I don't think that it's my assumption that they overrode what they believe to be the public preference. So anyway, that's,
Yeah.
again, this is opinion, I'm sharing it, it's just mine, so.
Right, right.
And I'll just share a fact that at that meeting, the CDI letter was presented to the zoning board. The members at the time did write a letter in support of the project, and that letter was read. And there were other people who wrote letters in support of the project. So I think people both who were supportive and who are opposed, both sides spoke at that meeting. And so it isn't an either or.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, any other closing reflections?
Oh, closing reflection. So I was a poster for the event, and you know about this, Pat.
I do.
Yeah.
I was sorry I wasn't able to
Yeah,
come. Yes, it
yeah,
looked like a
Yeah,
great
so
event.
we were all there,
Yeah.
and I just enjoyed that I happened to see it in the paper. And then decided to tell all of you, and then we all decided to go.
Right.
And then I come in here to meet up with Crystal and Mark ahead of time to see that it's the Hopkins Academy Diversity Club. So we get there and there's Amy Latham, who was on our committee.
It's a liaison.
At
Yeah.
Malaysia,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah,
so it was not only an enjoyable event and also enjoyable to socialize with us and others, but to establish a connection again with that we're here. And they, remember we got in here, the students lit up, people from the public came.
Right.
And we were lit up, like, we're glad you're doing this.
It's
And
nice.
so it was just another light in town.
Right,
And that's my little, you can all share, but that's my little, I think that's a great reflection.
And the food was great.
It
Yeah.
was.
They had different dishes from Sudan, and they had the ingredients and how to make it. So this way, if you wanted to take it home and make it, you can. Also, that's where I met two of the people I spoke on for the diversity. They work at they're in the school for the diversity club, spoke with them in length, and Adam is wonderful. Elizabeth is wonderful. I mean, like Mark said, they are so articulate and just amazing. I mean,
Adam's a senior and.
Yeah.
In
Elizabeth is a
Hopkins.
Junior.
I think she's.
Elizabeth, I think, is a junior, yeah. So to have that youth on our board and that perspective of the growing generation, just to see where their head is at, is something I would love to embrace. But again, and we have to be careful because they still are young adults, and he can't be too descriptive on what we have to say.
Perhaps faculty advisor or someone will say, why don't they just attend as public
Right,
for a few meetings and see if
Exactly.
they want to actually ask to be appointed by the
right.
select board or
Mhm.
just opt in.
I think
That's
you
why I
have to
was
be a
saying-
certain age, right?
I
Because
think
we
so.
did have a
We
liaison
have a-
student.
Mm.
and
Well,
she
Amy
wasn't
said
able
17
to-
was good.
17 is
Yes,
17.
Amy did say
Okay.
17 was good, and also, as I stated earlier, I would like just to have them sit in, and just see what we're about, and
Mhm.
then, get their opinion, and not have them, if it is approved, and if it is okay and no conflict, not to have them every single meeting, but enough meetings where they can gather information, enough meetings where they can provide us with, their ideas and everything, because they do, as I stated,
Mhm.
have their own life to go through, and it's a lot, but
Yeah.
I don't want to be the one to overwhelm. And plus Elizabeth is on another committee, so we want to be as lenient as possible. Okay, so,
I just had one more comment,
Sure.
and it had to do, Mark, you brought up the topic of if guest comes. Strangely, today, I was looking at agendas of a whole mess of other committees and printed them out because I was curious. And I see this committee, the Sahara Climate Change Committee, has on there a note on the agenda, public comments. 15 minutes are allocated and each person can have up to 3 minutes.
Mhm.
So my thought was, did people want me to do that? And
Do
we
what?
could, to put on the agenda? No? Okay.
Not right now.
Yeah,
I think
no,
we have to,
I
I
think we
have
have
to go, so
Yeah,
I think
and-
that's
Cool.
worthy of a discussion,
Right.
Joanne. I appreciate.
Well, that's
you
what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Do we want me to put that on the agenda for
to have a-
discussion?
To have a discussion.
That's right, that's what I'm
Sorry.
asking.
Discussion.
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking.
Absolutely.
That's all I'm asking, not,
Okay.
not to
Yeah.
decide now.
so we can adjourn this meeting.
Yeah.
Do you have a motion?
I would so move that we adjourn.
And,
And you
Agreed.
second?
okay,
And I would say that we're supposed to do a roll call vote, and we can also combine this, because we didn't actually do the roll call vote on accepting the minutes. So
I accept the minutes and I accept that we adjourn the meeting.
I accept the
I
minutes.
thought we did do an
and
acceptance of the meeting.
we did
We
a
didn't do a roll
motion
call.
and a second, but we didn't do the roll
Oh,
call vote.
okay, okay.
So
So we
I,
did it.
Mark Dunn, I will approve the minutes and I will approve
Okay.
adjourning.